Eldritch Horror is a cooperative game based on the writings of H.P. Lovecraft. In Eldritch Horror, you and your team of investigators, the players, will be fighting against an Ancient One to save the world from imminent doom caused by the Ancient One and his minions. To win the game, players will have to collect clue tokens to solve 3 mysteries for your Ancient One before you run out of time and your Ancient One awakens. In most cases, if your Ancient One awakens, you will have to solve a 4th final mystery in order to win the game. Players will lose if all investigators are eliminated from the game while the Ancient One is awake, if certain effects throughout the game cause the investigators to lose, or if the final Mythos card enters play. Players will run across the world trying to solve mysteries by collecting these clue tokens, gaining artifacts while encountering expeditions, using possessions such as artifacts, assets, and spells, the whole time doing encounters that may cause them to become delayed, detained, or even worse, defeated. If you pass the test in these encounters, you can gain things that will help you along the way, such as skill upgrades, allies, and even services. But if you fail, you may gain conditions that will hinder your success in saving the world. Rumors will appear that will stifle your advancement in winning the game. Or monsters can surge in a location, causing it even more difficult to encounter this location. Along the way, gates will spawn that will cause pesky monsters to appear, and the doom track to tick down closer to 0, causing the Ancient One to awaken. This is Eldritch Horror. I'm laying the investigators on their side just for visual purposes for this video. Normally they would be standing up unless they became delayed or defeated, in which case you would lay them down on their side. Again, this is just for visual purposes for this video. The game board is broken up into 4 different segments. On the top of the board we have the Doom track. We will place a Doom token on the Doom track, and where the starting position of the Doom token depends on the Ancient One you are fighting. In the top left corner of the Ancient One sheet, you will see a number next to a symbol that represents the Doom token. That is where you will place the Doom token to start the game. Throughout the game, different results will cause the Doom marker to go down or up the Doom track, usually going down. And when it reaches 0, the Ancient One awakes. You would flip over the Ancient One sheet and resolve whatever is on the back of the Ancient One sheet. Throughout the game, Mythos cards will be played. And on the top left corner of the Mythos card, there are going to be different symbols. If this symbol appears, we will advance the Omen track marker by 1 clockwise. And if there are gates on the board with symbols that correspond with the symbol that the Omen track marker is on, you will move the Doom track 1 space per gate. Below the Doom and Omen track, we have the main play area. The main play area of the board is broken up into several different locations. As you can see, there are different colored locations throughout the board. Black locations are cities, blue locations are seaports, and green locations are wilderness areas. The city and wilderness locations can be broken up even further. The city locations have color-themed locations. There is green for the Americas, orange for Europe, and purple for Asia and Australia. Each of the color theme locations has text underneath the name of the location that'll tell you the probability of what will be accomplished if you successfully pass the encounter tests. For instance, you will most likely improve your observation if you pass an encounter test in San Francisco. Throughout the board, wilderness locations also have these postcard looking pictures on it, and they represent the expedition locations throughout the board. The active expedition of the game will be determined by the top card of the expedition encounter deck. Whatever the top card is, we will place the active expedition token on that corresponding location on the board. As you can see, there are different colored lines on the board, going from one location to another. These are called paths. The red herringbone type lines here are rail paths. The yellow dotted paths here are uncharted paths. And finally, the white lines are sea paths. Paths on the side of the board connect to paths on the opposite side of the board. For instance, Tokyo would connect to San Francisco. Location 19 would connect to location 1. If you forget, there's a legend on the left side of the board which tells you what the different paths and spaces represent. And finally, down on the lower left corner of the board, we have the reserve track for our assets. There are 4 spots on the reserve track that will constantly rotate assets as you gain them. The 5th spot on the reserve track is a bank loan. It is permanently there, and it will allow you to take a deck condition to add 2 successes to your test results during an acquire asset action. And we'll get to that in a minute. Each Ancient One comes with their own research encounter deck, their own mystery deck, and some Ancient Ones like Cthulhu here comes with a special encounter deck. If we look at the Ancient One sheet, we will see a number on the top left corner. Like I said before, that tells us where to start the Doom token on the Doom track. Below that, we have information about the cultists. The cultists in Eldritch Horror are specific to each Ancient One that is in play. So, when you go to battle a cultist, you would refer to the Ancient One sheet for its stats and any effects that the cultist would have. Below the cultist information, we have the setup information for the Ancient One. That tells us what we need to do in the beginning of the game to prepare the game for the Ancient One that we are playing against. Below that, we have the Mythos deck set up. Now that is broken up into 3 stages, and each stage has a different number of green, yellow, and blue Mythos cards. To the right of the cultist setup and Mythos deck information, we have the information of the Ancient One itself. This has information on the Ancient One's abilities, what will happen during the Reckoning phase, what is needed to be completed for the investigators to win, what will happen when the Doom track reaches 0, and finally some text about the Ancient One itself. Each investigator has their own investigator sheet along with a corresponding token. If we take a look at the sheet, we have the name of the investigator and what their trait is. So in case of Mark Harrington here, he is the soldier. Below that, we have his component action, and that is a special action to each investigator that can be done during the action phase, which we'll get into in a second. Below that, we have the investigator's special ability. Again, this is unique to each investigator, and it allows them to do special things throughout the game. Below that, we have how many health and sanity each investigator will max out at. In the beginning of the game, we will place tokens on these symbols here to represent how much damage that investigator has in either health or sanity. Now for health, we have tokens worth 3 points each, and then 1 point each. The same goes for sanity, and 1 point. Below that, we have their skills. We have their lore, their influence, their observation, their strength, and their will. These skills will be tested throughout the game during encounter and mythos phases, and they use certain items such as spells and assets. On the back of the investigator's card, on the left, we have a picture of the investigator, and next to that, we have a picture of the world with a circle indicating where the investigator will start. Below that, there's text telling you the exact space. When starting the game, you will take your investigator token and place it on that space. Below that, it tells you your investigator's starting items. You will give these starting items to the investigator. Below that is some backstory about the investigator. Going over to the top right of the card is the encounter that will happen to this investigator if that investigator were to die of an injury or death. Below that is the encounter that will take place if that investigator is defeated by sanity loss. The lead investigator token is given to the first player, and usually bad things happen to this person. Now, the lead investigator token stays with the player as long as they choose to. At the end of the mythos phase, the player with the lead investigator token may choose to pass it to the next person to their left. It's up to them. There are 9 gate tokens in Eldritch Horror that correspond with the Otherworld encounter cards. These gates are placed face down within easy reach everybody in the beginning of the game, and when they are triggered to open due to a Mythos card, which corresponds with this symbol, you will draw the first gate on the top of the deck and flip it over. This tells you where on the board to place that gate token. When a gate token is spawned, you must randomly draw a monster and place it on that location with the gate. If the monster has this green symbol on it in the right top corner, you would then flip over the monster tile and resolve any text on it in the back of it. Some monsters have the reckoning symbol on the bottom right corner of the tile. If that monster does, during the reckoning phase, you would flip it over and resolve any text next to the symbol for the reckoning. And we'll get into the reckoning in a bit. When gates are closed, they are discarded into a discard pile face up. When there are no more gates to draw from in your draw pile, you simply flip the discarded pile over and then shuffle these gates up and make a new draw pile out of them. If during the game all the gates have been used from the draw pile and are placed in the discard pile, you would turn the discard pile face down, shuffle them, and create a new draw pile. If during the Mythos phase you cannot draw a gate due to both the discard and draw pile being exhausted and placed on the board, you will then have to advance to Doom marker 1 on the Doom track. During the Mythos phase, if this symbol appears, we refer to our reference card. In this case, for a 2-player game, we would spawn 1 clue token. You will draw a clue token from your draw pile, flip it over to reveal the location, and place that clue token on the location. If the game ever chooses for a random location to be chosen, you would do this by drawing a clue token and revealing what location is on the back of it, and then discarding the clue token. Throughout the game, you will be spending clue tokens, whether it be to solve a mystery on an ancient one, for an effect due to an encounter, or you can spend a clue token to reroll 1 die. When you discard a clue token, you do it face up in a separate pile. If the draw pile of the clue tokens ever runs out, you would flip the discard pile over, shuffle them, and then make a new draw pile out of the clue tokens. In order to gain a clue token on a location, you must do a research encounter, and these are specific to each ancient one. During an expedition, you may be able to gain relic cards. These are basically souped up assets and are very valuable. You can gain spell cards, which can help you out throughout the game. You can gain an asset card, which is helpful throughout the game. They consist of weapons and allies and services. During encounters, you can do many things. You can gain assets, you can improve skills, you can defeat monsters. But a lot of times, if you fail an encounter, you'll gain a condition card, and these are usually very bad. In Eldritch Horror, there are 3 phases to the game. There is the action phase, the encounter phase, and finally the Mythos phase. During the action phase, an investigator can do 2 of several actions, but he cannot choose to do the same action twice. The first action you can do is prepare for travel. If you are in a city that connects to either a train or sea path, you can choose to get a travel ticket. In order to get a travel ticket, you must be in a city that connects to a sea path, in which case you will get a boat ticket, or a train path, in which case you will get a train ticket. For example, Mark here is in Shanghai, and he would like to prepare to travel, taking a boat ticket. He can do this because Shanghai is connected to a sea path. Shanghai is also connected to rail paths, so he could also take a train ticket if he chooses to, but he cannot take both at the same time. If Mark were in Istanbul, the only travel ticket he could take is a train ticket, due to the fact that Istanbul is only surrounded by train paths. You can only get 1 ticket per turn, and you can have a maximum of 2 tickets at any given time. We'll get into exactly how they work with travel during the travel action in a second. During the travel action, a player can move his investigator from one space to another space that is connected to a path. For example, Mark can move from Shanghai to the Himalayas because it is connected by this yellow dotted line, an uncharted path. Mark cannot move from Shanghai to Tunguska because it is not connected by a path, or because it would take him 2 turns to move to a path under a normal movement condition. An investigator may use travel tickets to extend their movement during the action phase. For instance, Mark is in Shanghai here, and he wants to go to Tunguska. Under normal conditions, Mark could only move from Shanghai to Space 19, and then he would have to end his action. But being that he has a train travel ticket, Mark can move from Space 19 and then to Tunguska. You can use up to 2 travel tickets during one turn. So say Mark was here on location 17, and he wanted to go to London, all the way up here. He could do his first movement action going to Istanbul. Then he can use a train travel ticket and go from Istanbul to Rome. And finally, he can use a boat travel ticket and go from Rome to London. A player can go up to 3 spaces on a travel movement. A player must do their initial travel action first. They could not do their travel action, then stop and do another action, and then use a travel ticket to continue traveling. For example, Mark could not go from Space 17 to Istanbul, and then rest, and then play his train ticket to go from Istanbul to Rome. Another action a player can do is choose to rest. They can do this on any space on the board, as long as that space does not contain a monster. When you rest, you can recover 1 health and 1 sanity token up to the maximum amount of health and sanity that your character starts out with. For example, Mark is here on location 10 and he wishes to rest. Now he can only gain 1 health token because his sanity is at full strength. However, if Mark was here in Shanghai with Cthulhu, he could not choose to rest. If 2 investigators are on the same spot, they can choose to trade with each other. An investigator may choose to trade any possession they have other than a condition. So in this example, it's Lola's turn and she is in Rome with Mark. She can choose to trade either an asset such as his bullwhip, a relic if she had a relic, in this case a lightning gun. She could trade a spell with Mark if she wanted to, like this withering spell. She could even trade clue tokens with Mark if she chose to. But as you can see, Lola has a paranoia condition. She cannot trade a condition with another investigator. Another action a player can do is try to acquire assets. This is done as long as an investigator is in a city that does not contain a monster. To do this, an investigator would test their influence and roll that many dice. Then the investigator would add up their successes, a 5 or a 6, and they would see how many successes match up with the asset they are trying to acquire. This number is in the top left corner of the asset card. For instance, Mark is in Rome without any monsters in the city with him, and he wants to try and acquire assets. To do this, Mark will test his influence, which is 2. Then he will add any modifiers he has, such as his personal assistance, which will give him +1 influence. It also gives him the ability to reroll 1 die when resolving an influence test. So Mark would take 2 dice for his influence and 1 die for the personal assistant. He would then roll 3 dice. He has 1 success, so he could gain any asset on the reserve track that has a 1 cost. In this case, it could be the arcane manuscripts or the lucky rabbit's foot. But say Mark rolled 3 successes. So Mark can choose the arcane manuscript and the holy order, as long as the assets equal to the amount of successes you have rolled. Once the assets have been taken, you will simply restock them with the top card in the asset deck. Let's say that Mark wanted this double-barrel shotgun. He rolled 3 successes, and it's not enough to get the double-barrel shotgun, which costs 4 successes. He could take a bank loan, which will give him 2 additional successes, but he must take a debt condition. In order to do that, you will take your condition deck and search from the bottom of the deck until you reach the condition you are looking for. In this case, it would be a deck condition. You would then take the deck condition and place it with the rest of his possessions. Now with spells and conditions, you can have the same type of condition or spell, as in this case with the Withering spell and the Clairvoyant spell, which are both incantations. You can have the same type of spell or condition, but you cannot have or willingly accept the same exact spell or condition. And I screwed this up in the run-through. I took two conditions that were the same type. I forget what they were, but I could not willingly do that. I apologize from this, and I'm sorry for any confusion that ensued. If Mark did not roll any successes, he then has the option to remove one of the assets on the reserve deck and replace it with another asset. Another action an investigator can take is called their component action. This is the action that is written on their investigator sheet. This is specific to each individual investigator. Mark's component action is, if he's on a space with the monster, they would each lose 1 health. So Mark will use his component action. He will take 1 loss in health, and the monster he is with, the Riot in this case, will take a loss of health too. To do this, you would flip the monster over and look at his toughness. That's how many health the monster has. You would then add a health token to the monster's token to indicate that he has 1 hit in health. So in the future, if an investigator was attacking this monster, he would only have to roll 2 successes instead of 3 to defeat this monster, as it stands now. The final action an investigator can take is an action on their possessions. For example, Lola here is in Tokyo with this cultist. She could use this lightning gun action and they would each lose 1 health. But there's a special rule to this. Lola also has this detained action. The only action she can take with this detained action is the local action. If she would pass, she can then move on to her second action. But if she fails, she cannot do anything else. If you end your action phase on one of these colored locations, you can choose to do a generic encounter, which is depicted by these black encounter cards. Locations with clue tokens will allow you to do a research encounter, which is specific to an ancient one, and helps you solve the mystery of that ancient one. The generic encounters and the research encounters work similarly. You flip the card over, and then you find on the card what location type you're at. In this case, Mark's in the C location. You'll then resolve any text that is in that section of the card. If you were to end your action phase on a colored scheme location, you can choose to do these color themed cards, as in this case, green equals North and South America. Orange would represent Europe. Purple areas would represent Asia and Australia. The color scheme encounters work similar to the generic encounters, as in you would flip the card over and then resolve the text at the name of the city that you are in. If you end your action phase on a location with the active expedition encounter token, you can choose to do an expedition. This will give you relics, which are powerful possessions if you pass. If you fail, though, there can be dire consequences. Locations on gates with them will allow you to encounter other worlds, which will help you close the gate and slow down the clock from ticking down. Expedition and other world encounters also work similarly. You would flip the card over when you get there, and then you would resolve the card in stages. These are called complex encounters. First, you would resolve the top of the card, in the white area here. Then, depending on whether you pass or fail, you would move to the middle or the end of the card. If you passed, you would go to the yellow middle section of the card and resolve any text there. If you fail, then you go to the bottom red section of the card and resolve any text there. If an investigator ends his action phase on a location with a monster, He must defeat the monster before he can move on to any other encounter on the location. If the investigator is on a location with more than one monster, he must encounter and successfully defeat all the monsters on the location before he can move on to any other encounters. He can choose which monster to encounter first. When you encounter a monster, the first thing you want to do is flip the monster tile over. And then there are some things we have to deal with. First thing we'll have to do is a horror check. As you can see here on the top line of the monster tile, we'd have to test the investigator's sanity plus or minus any modifiers. And then we would have to have successes equal to the number of sanity damage that the monster would deal. So in the case of the Dark Young here, his horror check is will minus 1. Mark's will is 4. So he would take 4 dice and subtract 1 for the monster's modifier. We roll the 3 dice remaining and add up any successes. In this case, Mark did not succeed at all. Then we would take the number of successes we rolled and subtract that from the damage dealt by the monster. In this instance, is 3. So if we subtract 0 from 3, we have 3 damage and sanity. Next, we will actually combat the monster. Now to do this, it's similar to the horror check, with one difference. As you can see in the top right corner, in the green squiggly line background, there's a number. That is the monster's toughness. In essence, that's the number of successes that you have to roll to beat this monster. If you roll any less successes than that, you would place a health token on the monster to indicate how many hits and damage you have dealt to the monster in previous turns. When there are as many health tokens on the monster tile as there are a number of toughness, the monster is defeated. In order to combat a monster, you will have to test your strength plus or minus any modifiers. Next to the section that shows any modifiers on the strength test, you'll see a number with a heart there. This number represents the monster fighting back. If you roll that many successes, you do not take any damage. But if you roll any less successes, you will take damage. You would simply subtract the difference between the damage dealt by the monster and the number of successful rolls that you have. So in this instance, Mark has to test his strength minus 3. If we look over here at his player card, you can see his strength is 4. So Mark has 4 will. We give him 4 dice, and then we subtract 3 due to the monster's modifier. Now, Mark has this withering spell, which he could have used during the combat encounter if he chose to. To do that, he would have to test his will, which is 1, and then he would gain plus 3 if he passed the test. Mark also has his arcane manuscripts here, which gives him plus 1 when testing his will, his lore. So that would be 2 dice. He would then roll both dice, and if he had any successes, he would pass and be able to have plus 3 combat. But he did not. He failed. So we flip the card over and resolve any text next to these numbers here, which indicate how many successes you rolled. Mark rolled 0, and it says he must discard this card unless he gains an internal injury condition or spends a clue token. So, as you can see, Mark has this 38 revolver and this bullwhip. When you have multiple weapons, you can use both. But as far as modifiers go, you have to use the card with the highest modifier. So in this case, between the 38 revolver and the bullwhip, the 38 revolver has a higher modifier than the bullwhip. So Mark must take the plus 2 strength for the 38 revolver. But the bullwhip will allow him to roll 1 additional die when resolving a strength test during a combat encounter. So, if Mark rolls any failures, he can reroll 1 die. Okay, so we add 2 dice for the 38 revolver, which gives him 3 dice. Now he can Now we'll roll, see how many successes we have. We have 2 successes. But Mark has this bullwhip, which will allow him to reroll 1 die during combat. So we'll reroll the 1 die. And it went off camera, but it was another 6. Not a good number. If we look at the monster tile, Mark rolled 3 successes, so he does not take any damage. But he did not roll 5 successes, so he did not defeat the monster. So we would add 3 hits of damage to the monster tile. Okay. The next time somebody encounters this monster, they will only have to roll 2 more successes to defeat their monster, as indicated by subtracting the amount of toughness by the amount of health tokens on the monster. So, in this case, it would be 2 more successes. If we subtract 3 from 5, we get 2. An epic monster is the same as a normal monster, only a little more powerful. And you can tell the difference between the two by this lower left corner of the tile on an epic monster missing. So if we flip Cthulhu here over, we can see that his card is a little different. His tile is a little different than a normal monster. Most epic monsters and some regular monsters have an asterisk where the toughness would be. Okay, so to figure this out, we'd have to go down on the bottom of the tile. So in this case, Cthulhu's toughness is the number of investigators plus 3. Okay, so Mark's going to fight Cthulhu here. His toughness is the number of investigators, which is 2, plus 3, which equals 5. So first he will test his will minus 2. Mark's will is 4. We would subtract 2, and then we would roll to see how many successes we have. We have 1 success, but we need 5 in order not to take any damage. So Mark took 4 damage in sanity. But as you can see, Mark only has 1 sanity. So Cthulhu defeated Mark. When an investigator is defeated, you will take either a health token or a sanity token, depending on which effect defeated the investigator, and place that type of token on the investigator. So the first thing we would do is take the investigator's token and move it to the closest city. And then we would lay the investigator on his side. Then we would take the token that defeated the investigator, in this case sanity, and place it on the defeated investigator's token. Next we would advance the doom token by 1 on the doom track. Then we would take the investigator's player sheet and remove any remaining tokens, either health or sanity, from the sheet. And we would place all of his possessions, other than conditions, on the player sheet. This includes coup tokens or spells. And we would put that off to the side. If Mark were the lead investigator, we would pass the lead investigator token to the next person on the left. After the investigator is defeated, the player can choose a new investigator at the end of the mythos phase. You would then take the new investigator sheet along with any starting items such as tokens or weapons or whatnot, and place the new investigator token on the starting location. Another encounter an investigator can take is encountering a defeated investigator. To do this, the investigator would have to be on the same location as the defeated investigator, and then we would flip the defeated investigator's sheet over. And on the back, up top, you can see there is an encounter if the investigator was defeated due to health. And on the bottom, there is an encounter that you would use if the investigator was defeated by sanity. You would simply resolve any of the text, and whatever the outcome is the outcome. Throughout the game, Mythos cards will create encounters throughout the board, most often in a rumor encounter. As an encounter, an investigator can choose to encounter a Mythos card. Throughout the game, Mythos cards will be played, and on the top left corner of the Mythos card, there are going to be different symbols. If this symbol appears, we will move the omen track 1 space in a clockwise manner. We will then look at the board and see how many gates correspond with the symbol on the omen track. In this example, there are 2, Sydney and Shanghai. You would move the doom marker down that many spaces on the doom track. So we move the doom marker down from 4 to 2 on the doom track. The next symbol is a monster surge. We would look at the omen track to see what omen corresponds with the gates on the board. In this example, there are 2, Sydney and Shanghai. We would then look at our reference card and see how many monsters to spawn on each of those gates. So in this case, in a 2-player game, we would spawn 1 monster on each gate. We would then draw from our monster cup 1 monster for each of the corresponding gates. As you can see, the color out of space has this green symbol on the top right corner of the tile. This means that there is an immediate effect for this monster. You would flip the monster over and resolve whatever text is on the back of the tile. In this instance, we would move this monster to Tungusta. The magnifying glass symbol means you would spawn a clue token. To do this, we will draw a clue token at random from our draw pile and turn it over to see the location on the back of the clue token, in this instance London. We would then flip the clue token back over so the magnifying glass was facing up, and then place the clue token on the location depicted by the token. Another symbol we may run into is the reckoning effect. To resolve the reckoning effect, there's a specific order you must do. First, we must go to every monster on the board that has the symbol in the lower right corner of that monster tile. We would then flip it over and resolve whatever is on the back of that. In this case, the cultist, you would refer to the Ancient One. But as you can see for Azathoth, the Ancient One's cultists do not have any reckoning effect. Next, you would go to the Ancient Ones themselves. As you can see, Azathoth does not have a reckoning effect, but Cthulhu does. So we would go to the line next to the reckoning symbol, this symbol here, and resolve any of the effects that are written on the Ancient One sheet. Next, we would go to any Mythos cards that are in play. We would read the text at the bottom of the card next to the reckoning symbol, and then resolve any text that is there. In this case, we would remove 1 Eldritch token from this sheet. And finally, we would go to the Investigator's possessions. Remember that deck condition Mark chose to get this double-barreled shotgun? It has a reckoning symbol on it, in the lower right corner of the card. We then go to the text next to the reckoning symbol and resolve any text there. In this case, we would flip this card over and resolve any text on the back of the card. If we run into this symbol here during the game, we would spawn a gate. To do this, we would once again refer to our reference card and spawn the amount of gates that the card tells us to. In this case, it's 1. We would then go to our gate draw pile and flip over the top gate. This will give us a location on it, in this case Tokyo. You would then place the gate token on the location the gate tells you to, and draw a monster from the monster cup and place it on that location. Another symbol you may encounter during the Mythos phase is the rumor symbol. This is usually accompanied by an Eldritch token symbol. The rumor symbol has a number on it that tells you what space to place the rumor token on it. And the Eldritch symbol has a number on it that tells you how many Eldritch tokens will go onto this card due to the ongoing rumor. So in this example, we would place the rumor token on spot 11, and then 8 Eldritch tokens on the card itself. Throughout the game, certain effects will cause an investigator become delayed. If this happens, you simply lay the investigator on its side. That indicates that the investigator is delayed. If this happens during the encounter or mythos phase, the investigator will skip its action phase and only stand the investigator upright. Then during the encounter phase, they will do their encounter as usual. If an investigator becomes delayed during his action phase, he will end his actions immediately and then be able to do his actions on his next turn. If an investigator is defeated while the Ancient One is awake, unlike being defeated when the Ancient One is asleep, the investigator would be removed from the game and the player cannot choose another investigator to play with. In essence, the player is out of the game. Okay, folks. To set up Eldritch Horror, the first thing you want to do is place your board within easy reach of everybody. Okay, next. We want to shuffle our encounter decks and set them next to the board. Again, within easy reach of everyone. Okay, so here we got our generic encounters, our South American encounters, our European encounters, and finally our Asian and Australian encounters. We also want to shuffle and place the other world encounters, okay? Right here, down there. Alright. Okay, next we want to place the Omen marker on the green comet on the Omen track. Next thing we want to do is shuffle the expedition cards. Place them within easy reach, everybody. Then we would take the active expedition token and place it on the location that corresponds with the top expedition encounter card. Next we want to choose an Ancient One. In this video we'll be using Azathoth. Once we choose our Ancient One, we will take his research encounter cards along with his mystery cards and place them near him. Also, certain Ancient Ones have special encounter cards. If that Ancient One has them, you would place them off the side following the setup rules for the Ancient One. You will then put the remaining Ancient Ones along with their decks and place them back in the box. We'll not be using them for the rest of the game. Okay, now we're going to build a Mythos deck. As you can see, the Ancient One, Azathoth, has stages where stage 1 will use 1 green Mythos card, 2 yellow, and 1 blue. So here we go. The green Mythos cards, they've been shuffled and stacked. Then we have the yellow Mythos cards. And finally we have the blue Mythos cards. So now, as you can see, each stage has a certain amount of cards for that stage. So in the first stage, we will use 1 green, 2 yellow, and 1 blue card. Okay? Next stage we'll be using 2 green, 3 yellow, and 1 blue card. And for the final stage we'll be using 2 green, 4 yellow, and no blue cards. We will then take the Mythos deck that we drew from and we will place them cards in the box. They will not be used for the game. Now you want to shuffle each stage individually and then stack them one on top of each other. So stage 2 would go on top of stage 3, stage 1 would go on top of stage 2, and there you have your Mythos deck. Place that over by the Ancient One. Now as you can see up here, there's a number. That indicates where you're going to place your Doom token on the Doom track. So in this case, we'll be placing it on 15. Now, Azathoth's other startup condition was to place an Eldritch token by the green comet of the Omen track. Now that we know that Azathoth won't be using any monsters, we will place the regular monsters in a cup, a bag, whatever you choose to use, and place him off to the side. Okay, next each player will choose an investigator and place their investigator on the starting position located in the back of the investigator sheet. They will also take any starting equipment that investigator gets. Next, we will fill each of the investigator's health and sanity tokens to the proper amount. Then we will place all of our extra tokens and our epic monsters off to the side of the board within easy reach of everybody, along with any Eldritch, skill upgrade, and both travel tokens. Now that our players have all their starting equipment, we will shuffle and place the spell cards, the artifact cards, the condition cards, and the asset card within easy reach everybody. Once the asset deck has been shuffled, we will draw the first 4 cards and place them in the reserve. Next, we will place the reference card within easy sight everybody. We will place the clue tokens face down and shuffle them up. We will then shuffle the gate tokens and place them face down within easy reach everybody. And finally, we will do what the card tells us to do. So for a 2-player game, we will spawn 1 gate. We flip the gate around. We have Buenos Aires. We'll place the gate on Buenos Aires and draw a monster. In this case, we have the cultist. Now, being the cultist has this green symbol in the upper right corner, we would normally flip it over. But in case of the cultist, it'll tell you to refer to the Ancient One card. Okay, then place the monster with the stats down in the location that the gate is in. Then we will spawn the amount of clue tokens indicated by the reference card. In a 2-player game, it is 1 clue token. So we draw a clue token at random. In this case, it'll be on location 9, and we would place that clue token on location 9. We will then draw the top mystery card to be solved for your Ancient One. Also draw the top Mythos card, and then we would resolve the immediate effects of the Mythos phase. In the run through, I screwed this up. I should have referred to the symbols at the top left of the card and did any effects that would have had. But, like I said, I screwed it up. Sorry. And finally, players will decide who the lead investigator will be, and you are now ready to play Eldritch Horror.